Most things in life are not one size fits all, and that is definitely true of hearing aids. There's a lot to consider beyond fit. Local audiologist Dr. Gnewikow tells us more.
You need to know a little of the history, and I've probably mentioned this in other episodes. Initially, when people couldn't hear, they put their hand behind their ear, and just like in a musical instrument, when you change the size of the cavity, it changes the resonant frequency of that cavity so that certain frequencies amplify more. And it just so happens when you do this, the frequencies most important to understanding words are being amplified physically. And then came the time of the horn, and you've all seen the jokes where a guy's got a horn in his ear. Beethoven actually had one, which actually does the same thing, and it actually works. So it's a fairly inexpensive hearing aid, so if you've got an old horn laying around the house. And then at one time, people of great wealth, like emperors or kings, they would have, there was one instance where a hearing aid was actually made into a throne. Really? Where he had a little tube that came out of the throne that stuck in his ear, and people would talk into the arms of the throne. Cool. And because of the shape, it would resonate the signal and he could hear better. So that was a throne hearing aid. Then, of course, the time came when we had vacuum tubes and electronics were beginning to take over hearing aids. And the first hearing aids were probably the size of a table. They were very large and very cumbersome, but they did work to a degree. And then they got a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller. And then finally, we got to the point where transistors came out, and then the first hearing aids with transistors were either the body aids, which you might remember your great-grandmother wore with a little wire. And then we got to the point where we used over-the-ear, and the over-the-ear hearing aids were the first ones that came out, basically. And then they kind of transitioned to in the ear, and now it's completely reverted to back to the over the ear again. So as far as styles, I am wearing hearing aids. I am wearing the over the ear style hearing aids. So if you look at my ear, you see a very tiny little tube here, and behind my ear, the hearing aid is pretty much camouflaged by my hair. We generally make the hearing aids the color of the person's hair to camouflage it. Because so many people are concerned with the cosmetics, which probably shouldn't be a concern, but it is. And so this is one type of hearing aid. There is another type which a lot of people have used in the past. We're seeing less of them, and it was called an in the ear. So you had one piece, it fit into the ear, and it kind of looks like you have a big piece of cotton in your ear, but the amplifier, the receiver, the battery, and all of it is actually in the opening of your ear. A lot of people think, oh, that's what I want because it doesn't show, and obviously it shows far more than the hearing aid I wear in this ear, which is an over the ear. As time went on, we got a little bit smaller. Oops. This is a Canal Hearing Aid. It's the same principle, but it is smaller. And so basically, it doesn't fill the ear up in entirety. Still worked reasonably well, but it eliminated the piece over, which sometimes people had objected to earlier. And then the last type of hearing aid is called a CIC, which stands for completely in the canal. Oh. So this is the battery, this is the microphone, this is the receiver. And so when you put this in your ear, you really basically don't see it. So those are the basic types of hearing aids that are used now.
From the basic types of hearing aids to the ones that work the best, we'll be taking a closer look after this. Welcome back. Before the break, we discussed different types of hearing aids with local audiologist Dr. Gnewikow. Now we talk about which type works best. Take a look.
That's a big issue because you have to balance the cosmetics, balance the comfort, and balance the hearing. And being able to hear and understand distinctly is really the bottom line. That's the most important. But at the same time, you want to have something that is cosmetically acceptable to people so they will use it. I have all of these hearing aids.
Oh, interesting.
I wear the one over the ear with the thin tube. And I do that because, well, cosmetically it's nice. Most people don't notice it even when I'm talking to them one-on-one. But it's much more comfortable because with probably 50% of the hearing losses we see, it's not required that we stop the ear up. So basically we put a very tiny tube, not much larger than a hair, and the ear is left completely open. So you don't have the sensation of, I don't want to wear a hearing aid because it's going to block my ear up, and I don't want that sensation. These absolutely do not block the ear at all. The ones that seem to block it the most based on my experience using hearing aids, are the very tiny ones, and they do have a tendency to make you feel like you're kind of clogged up. As far as which ones work the best, I think for a mild hearing loss, all of them would probably be adequate. But the over-the-ear type device has the most, they're the most versatile, because as the hearing changes, they have much more range in them. And so if a person starts out with a 30% loss of hearing and 5 years from now it's down to a 60% loss, having an over-the-ear that has more range in it allows them to utilize the same device without having to purchase another hearing aid, and they're kind of expensive. So as far as versatility is concerned, my vote is generally for the over-the-ear. As far as comfort is concerned, my vote is also for the over-the-ear, simply because you can leave the ear open and not put the hearing aid on the inside. So cosmetics is a concern, but what is the real cosmetic of hearing loss is not the hearing loss. It's not the type of hearing aid you use to deal with the hearing loss. It's the hearing loss itself. And if a person asks the question, yeah, but what do I look like with a hearing aid?
Right.
The question should be, what do I look like without one? If I ask you, how are you feeling today? And you say, oh, about 7:45, then everybody in the room kind of looks like, hey, you're losing it a little. And it wasn't that you didn't know the answer, it was that you didn't know the question. Mm-hmm. And what really is the main issue of our appearance to people is not necessarily a device that's virtually invisible, but it's our personality and the way we respond. And so when a person comes in, I try to talk to them about comfort, I try to talk to them about what's going to help them the most, but also it's important to realize the real cosmetic issue is the hearing loss. So I think if you think of it in those terms, then whether it shows a little or doesn't show is of less consequence. Very few of us try to take our hair and cover our glasses up because they're common. And nowadays with hearing aids, since we use so much other technology, it's such a common event to see a person who's 13 years old walking around with Bluetooth hanging over his ear, and no one bats an eye. Mm-hmm. And yet we are concerned about a hearing aid, which is about a fourth the size of that, which really doesn't show at all. So my feeling on cosmetics is try to get people happy when they get a hearing aid, something that they will wear and use. But realize that almost any hearing aid you choose now, with the size and the technology we have, will be virtually invisible if you style your hair right. And again, if you're hearing better, then you've improved your cosmetics in areas that you hadn't even realized.
Audiology Hearing Aid Associates has 2 area locations, one in Lynchburg, 434-528-4245. Also online at Digital Hearing for You. Another location is on Main Street in Danville. Their phone number there, 434-799-6288.